You're trying to sell the idea that a movie is real to suspend people's disbelief. And here comes this idea that it's so real that it haunted the people on set, and you could actually, it's risky for you to watch this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a great sales pitch.
What Went Wrong is a podcast that takes a loving look at Hollywood's most disastrous movie productions and happens to be one of my favorite shows out there. Hosts Chris Winterbauer and Lizzie Bassett join me to tell the stories of 3 allegedly cursed horror movies, the potentially paranormal forces that affected their productions and releases, as well as the tragedies and unexplained events that befell the cast, crew, and sometimes even the audiences. Were these films really possessed by dangerous, otherworldly energy? Or are we dealing with social conditions, marketing gimmicks, and safety violations that are all too human? I'm your host, Chelsey Weber-Smith, and this is American Hysteria. I am thrilled to introduce these 2 podcasters from one of my most favorite podcasts out there, What Went Wrong. And welcome, Chris and Lizzie. Thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. We're very excited.
I'm so excited. And today we are talking about a very fun topic that I think kind of permeates the world of horror movies and has for a long time. And that is the curses that follow some of the darker movies made in the last 100 years. So today we're going to cover 3 of them, and we'll get to, we'll surprise you with what those are as we go along. But first, I thought it'd be fun to talk to both of you about your feeling about the curses, about the paranormal. Are we skeptics? Are we believers? Where do we stand?
I will say I'm just very easily convinced either way. I can be easily convinced of a ghost, and then I can be just as easily convinced that it is someone in a sheet. So I will go whatever way the wind blows.
I like that.
But I love the idea of ghosts. I like the idea of curses. Not don't curse me.
No.
But I have always been, excited about the idea of the paranormal. Even with I think the knowledge in the back of my head always that it's probably not real, but I'm happy to believe in it.
You like to have fun.
I like to have fun.
Yeah. All right, Chris, what about you?
Chris, no fun, Winterbauer.
So I will say, no. I love the stories. I will sit and listen to a YouTube story, Mr. Ballin telling a weird random ghost story. I'm like, I don't know who this gentleman is. I don't know why I'm listening to him, but this is compelling. It's interesting. I do not. I am a skeptic. I am not a religious person. I am not, although I would call myself a humanist, I'm not a very spiritual person. And though I think there are many interesting things in the universe we cannot explain, and I'm open to the idea of forces that may connect us. No, I'm not a big curse believer, not a big ghost believer. And I have a lot of theories as to why movies in particular are particularly potent vectors for stories like these, and why we do tend to get these clusterings of tragedy, perhaps mishaps escalating into tragedies, in certain examples with movies. But the stories themselves, yes, of course, they're biblical in many senses. They feel almost primordial in many senses. The idea of luck and, karma are ideas that have permeated our society. And I think especially American individualist society, where your fortunes rise and fall according to your merit, supposedly, in the United States.
Yes.
That all ties into these ideas of cursing and the justice or injustice of them, as well as, the idea of movies themselves, which are ultimately you're watching ghosts of people on screen. And so there's something really compelling about movies and ghosts and curses. And it's all made up, but I find it very compelling, or I feel that it is an attempt at the brain to rationalize patterns that may not actually be there.
Yeah.
So we've got a paranormal sociologist on our hands, it sounds like.
No.
Okay.
You have a douchebag armchair psychologist on your hands.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
Well, it is kind of the same appeal as conspiracy theories, I think.
Yes,
like
definitely.
These sort of paranormal things. It's exactly what Chris said. It's to make sense of the chaos. And as much as I wish I was someone who did not desire to make sense of the chaos, I most certainly do.
Yes.
And I think we all have our own favorite. I have my own personal favorite conspiracy theory that I don't actually believe, but I find it. I like Ancient Aliens. I think is amazing. I think it's absurd. Graham Hancock, Chariots of the Gods. It's all so silly. It's so ridiculous. But do I kind of like watching that Netflix show about it? Sure, it's very fun.
Yes.
So I think we all have that outlet, that we need with some of these.
You're right, and I think that. I think I'm somewhere between both of you, actually, in that, our show is about, well, I never like to say our show is a debunking show because I do not debunk. But, we do look at a lot of things that are fantastical beliefs and then try to figure out kind of, as Chris, you were saying, like, what are the political and social and cultural forces that might be driving this to break into our world psychologically, these different paranormal phenomena. So I definitely lean on that side. But I've had a lot of ghost experiences. I've had a lot of hauntings in my life. Do I believe in my own experience? Not necessarily, but, so I land somewhere in the middle. So we'll see what we think about these curses as a trio here. Shall we get into it?
Yes.
Let's do it.
All right, perfect. So I will be starting with the 1973 horror classic, The Exorcist. Have you both seen The Exorcist?
Oh, yes.
We have.
Yes. What was your experience with The Exorcist? What was your first experience, kind of as you do on the show? I'm interested in that.
I saw it very young, arguably far too young to have watched that movie. And I remember not being particularly scared by it. I thought it was kind of gross. Like, all I remembered was the pea soup. And I was like, this is kind of gross. And like, it's a 70s horror movie. It did not have a huge impact on me. And then I watched it as an adult. And I just remember like tears flowing out of my eyes because I was too scared to close them. This movie absolutely scared the crap out of me the older I got. And I'm not entirely sure what that's about. Maybe it's a different understanding of the mother-daughter relationship in this and how upsetting it would be to see your child experiencing what Reagan's experiencing. Or maybe it's just a growing fear of what lies beyond the grave and what may be waiting for me the closer I crawl towards it. But yeah, man, I love this movie, really love it. And it absolutely just scares me to death now.
Ugh. All right, Chris.
Yeah, I saw it when I was very young, and I didn't appreciate what it was trying to achieve with the horror that it was trying to do. The Exorcist, relative to many satanic panic films that follow, is not schlocky.
No.
And what I think is really wonderful about this movie is that it's ultimately a movie about a crisis of faith with Father Karras. And the most compelling and some of the most terrifying moments of the movie are his dream sequences and visualizations of the demon and his mother. And this is very much somebody who has lost the faith, who's fallen from the cloth, and he rediscovers it in this beautiful moment of, spoilers, self-sacrifice at the end of the film. And Reagan really just, once she's possessed, exists specifically to affront him, and religion, and less to scare him, almost more to shock him. And so I think it is a terrifying movie when you watch it now, especially as a parent, because
I bet
you feel helpless to help your child.
Yeah.
And there are a couple of Korean movies, The Wailing comes to mind, that have done something similar recently. But I think what the movie does so beautifully is it explores in a moment in America where I think there was a kind of consensus that the American dream as we had perceived it was perhaps a little more rickety than we had hoped after the promise of progress of, the civil rights movement and the kind of post-war boom. You hit a 70s economic situation that wasn't as maybe strong as we had thought it was going to be. And you've got a lot of political instability. I think during this period, there were like 750 bomb threats a day throughout the United States because of all of the, again, political unrest. And so I think this movie came at a moment when people, whether they felt it religiously or otherwise, felt that crisis of faith. And he's a very relatable character. And so I think this movie is, yes, it's a wonderful horror movie, but it actually works better as a drama. And I think it's a really fantastic movie.
Which I think the best horror movies do. And the other thing I will say about this movie is that they do not rely on jump scares. There are so few in this movie. And so frequently the scares are slow, which nothing gets me more than the moments in this where it's sort of like the statue like blooms on the wall and then recedes, or the face appears in the top of the oven. Man, I hate that face.
Ooh, that is so good. That is such a surprising moment. I love that moment.
I know. And so many wonderful horror movies have borrowed, I think, from the pacing of The Exorcist. Hereditary in particular comes to mind big time. And even the fact that you hear her moving down the stairs before you see her in the back bend, it's so incredibly well done. And the last thing I will say about biblical horror, and maybe this is why I like it and why it scares me more the older I get. I grew up in the South and, I went to church, but not a super religious family. However, as an adult, my mom has become a born again Christian.
Ooh, okay.
And watching that transformation and sort of the like literal way that the Bible is now interpreted, movies like this, and spoiler alert, another one that we will get to in this episode, I think have a very different impact on me.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, I did not grow up religious, which I think helped me not be scared of it when I also saw it extremely young. I don't know.
What were our parents doing?
I don't know. But I was thinking about how my mom had to have rented it because we had to get it somehow.
Yeah, it's rated R.
Yeah. And I know she got in trouble with my kind of cousin friend, a cousin friend, right? And my mom got in trouble from her best friend because we watched it with her daughter, who was like 2 years younger than me. And then I was also doing the Exorcist voice. I was being a little asshole. And so I definitely wasn't very scared by it like you, Lizzie, as a kid, which is, I don't know, maybe it just doesn't hit because we don't have an understanding, and I was not religious. So like I said, and so I just didn't have this context that I think made it scary. But I watched it again recently and it's an incredible movie. It really is. It's very special. And I love what you were saying, Chris, because when we talk about horror, we usually put it in its context. And, this was a movie that came during a crisis of faith. I mean, Watergate was happening. We had the 60s with all these incredible, but also very scary social changes for a certain class of people, right? It was like the changes of power and the dynamics. And then kind of even the hippies losing a bit of faith in their movement and turning into Jesus freaks. That was a huge thing that was going on at this time too. So there is the loss of, faith in psychology even and medicine. We're moving toward the new age and that's scaring people too. So I do think it was just this perfect moment for a movie like this to have such a massive impact. And I think to have so many strange happenings, whether they were real or interpreted or even perhaps created. We'll see. So for anyone who is unaware of what The Exorcist is about, just a short little summary here. The Exorcist follows the harrowing story of actress Chris McNeil, played by Ellen Burstyn, and her 12-year-old daughter Reagan, Linda Blair, who is violently possessed by an ancient demon from Mesopotamia. After exhausting all medical and psychological explanations, her mother contacts two Catholic priests, Father Marin, played by Max von Sydow, and Father Karras, played by Jason Miller, to perform an exorcism on Reagan, whose condition turns her into a demonic monster, and a dramatic battle against the forces of satanic evil ensues. So a little longer than the IMDb logline, but I wanted to get a bit more detail there. So this movie was directed by William Friedkin and developed from the novel by the same name by William Peter Blatty, and he also did the screenplay. And it was based on a real life, allegedly, real life possession and exorcism of a boy named Ronald Doe. And this boy was changed into Reagan when the screenplay was written. Interesting to me that the main character was made from a boy into a girl.
Yeah, that is interesting.
I think there were ways of shocking the audience. I think of the use of the crucifix.
Yeah, the sexualization of the little girl in this is a different level of disturbance, I think.
Absolutely.
And I think you can do a wider arc of behavior from how mellow and lovely she is at the beginning of the story. Whereas little boys, they can be little turds sometimes at the beginning, and you say, well, he's not that different. He's throwing his shit around the room. I'm not talking about my son, but
no, of course not. No.
Yeah.
Not yet.
Not yet. And I think, too, as we're talking about the social implications of this movie, there was the beginning of a satanic panic that did focus a lot on girls and the corruption of the young girl by, certain social forces that were out there in the world, let's say liberal forces. And, I think that it was more powerful to have and more frightening to have a girl, like you're saying, change that dramatically. It was always going to hit harder, I think, in America. Okay, so I think, right off the bat, people are nervous. This is weird. Haven't done anything like this before. And the fact that this was based on a purported real life exorcism kind of set a certain tone on the set. So as production began, strange events started to plague the set right away. The cast and the crew were experiencing kind of, paranormal-ish things. Like they saw objects move on their own. The most notable was there was a telephone that was used to communicate across the set, and people saw that actually rise and fall onto its receiver multiple times. Pretty creepy.
Yeah, I don't like that.
As the special effects guy is using monofilament from the ceiling to lift it.
Here he is. Skeptics here. Have you guys ever seen anything move on its own?
No.
No, I bet you have not, Chris. Neither of you? No. All right. I'm the haunted one here.
Ooh.
So I know. It's been a weird time for me. And, there were other instances. I couldn't find specifics, but these eerie events and just weird feelings all around led director William Friedkin to ask their religious advisor, which they had for the movie, Reverend Thomas Birmingham, to come on set to perform an exorcism of the set. You know about this, right?
Well, this was in part the basis of the most recent Russell Crowe movie.
Was it? I haven't seen it.
Oh my God, that movie was insane. Yes.
Not Lizzie, not the one where he's Italian.
No.
Next one.
I saw this. I know. I saw this one. I done watched it. It was the craziest thing I've ever seen.
So Russell Crowe, who I hold a deep affection for.
Love him.
Yeah, he's great.
I think he is one of the most charismatic performers of the last 40 years. He did back-to-back exorcism movies.
Yes. It's called The Exorcism, by the way.
The Exorcism.
Oh my gosh, his name is Anthony Miller. And Jason Miller is the name of the actor. And yeah.
It's written and directed by somebody involved in the first film's son. Please pull it up. I can't remember.
Joshua John Miller is the director.
Yes.
Oh, I bet it's Jason Miller's son.
Jason Miller's son. This movie was cursed in a different way. It took forever to come out. It was trapped in post-production hell. They thought they weren't going to finish it. It was shot during COVID. So it was his attempt to dramatize, I believe, the events around the first film.
Yes.
That's cool. I don't know how I missed that. That probably would have been helpful to my research.
Well, I'll tell you how you missed
Everybody missed it.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this movie was buried at the box office.
I went and saw it in theaters. It's absolutely nuts. I'm not saying don't watch it. I enjoyed it, but you can tell it got very messed up in post.
And they reshot a ton of it.
Okay.
I think they reshot at least 40 minutes of it. Yeah. Lizzie, is it true there's a big tone shift? Like, you can kind of tell that it's two movies stitched together a little bit.
At least two movies that have been switched. Yeah, it's wild. film. I really enjoyed it. There's some deaths in it where you're like, whoa.
Okay. All right.
That just
cool
come
kills.
absolutely out of nowhere and then are like never spoken of or revisited again. And you're just like, guess we didn't care about that man you just snapped in half. All right, moving on. But yes, that is quite a movie. And what I remember about it is that they go so far out of their way to not refer directly to the original movie, but they get so close so many times. But yeah, it's fun.
Okay. Well, I mean, that sounds worth it to me. I like a strange and wild ride.
I like Russell Crowe's turn into exorcism giving priests. I'm on board for more.
Vespa riding Italian Vatican exorcist priest. Yeah.
So Reverend Birmingham refused to do an exorcism because he thought it would make things worse. It would freak people out more. But then, according to lore, the very next day, the set of the McNeil home, all the different the room sets, caught fire and destroyed almost everything. But what was untouched? Do we know?
I do know. It's Reagan's room.
Yep. Reagan's room, totally untouched, very mysterious, of course.
Which was a creepy set anyway, because it was like refrifrigerated, right? Yeah. Which also, if we're going to be skeptics, that's probably why it didn't burn down. Because it was insulated.
That does make a lot of sense.
Yeah, sorry.
But the cause, according to Friedkin, was a pigeon just flying right into the circuit boxes, which started that fire, which is also just a very odd thing to have happened.
Okay.
Perhaps not paranormal, but just really, I don't know, just a pigeon hitting a circuit box and exploding. It's very...
Video footage of the pigeon right before is like, as it gets possessed and flies into the circuit box.
More after this. And now, back to the show. All right, so because of this fire, this is what the timeline is allegedly. The Reverend came back and then blessed the set in order to hopefully, stop whatever forces were causing these incidents. So it wasn't quite an exorcism, but it was something. But nonetheless, the damage would cause production to shut down for months while they had to rebuild everything. So that was kind of the first huge delay on a production that would have many of them. It doesn't appear the blessing worked because the sets would again be damaged by a malfunctioning sprinkler system, causing even more delays. Perhaps most paranormal of all, the statue that wasn't called Pazuzu in the film, but we now know as the demon Pazuzu,
yes.
The statue that was uncovered in Mesopotamia that kicked the whole thing off. They built that and it was shipped to Iraq to film the beginning of the movie. And, frighteningly, instead of being shipped to Iraq, it went to Hong Kong. So that's considered part of the curse.
Okay.
Some PA is just like, the curse really got us this time.
Yep, it's curse. But all of these kind of material problems paled in comparison to the actual human cost of this potentially demonic project. During a scene where Reagan, is growing stronger through her possession, in this scene, she throws her mom, Ellen Burstyn, from the bed. And the first take, this is a pretty famous story. The first take wasn't scary enough. The yank, her flying backwards just wasn't what Friedkin wanted. So he asked for it to be shot again and for the crew to pull the harness harder. And on that one, she sustained a fractured coccyx. And this injury kept her from filming for 2 weeks, another delay. She'd be on crutches for the rest of filming and she would suffer lifelong chronic pain from this injury. And most famously, the scream that came from the pain of that injury was actually used in the final cut of the film. Yeah, I mean, I don't like it.
No, I mean the real curse of this movie, and I my understanding is that they had a complicated relationship, she and Friedkin, for the rest of his life and her career. But it's Friedkin's willingness to employ dangerous or questionable directing techniques, and in our episode we discussed. He fired off a shotgun, to elicit reactions and permanent back problems as a result of this. And again, like one of the reasons film sets are particularly conducive, I think, to stories like these is number one, you're walking in with an existing narrative, right? We're stepping into something taboo or heretical in some way with this story. So we're already primed to look for something. But also, these are high pressure, short on time, dangerous, unfortunately often risky endeavors where shortcuts end up being taken that shouldn't be taken, especially with children. And I think that's, Friedkin's legacy as director is, I think, marred and complicated by this and, other films as well that we've discussed in our podcast and the methods that he used to create great art, but still.
Yeah. That's kind of part of my thesis here a little bit is what makes a cursed movie, right? So following up on that, there is a scene where Linda Blair, as Reagan, was strapped too loosely into a mechanism on her bed that was making the bed shake, making her shake, and it caused her to jerk up and down violently, and she fractured part of her spine, which caused her to develop scoliosis and lifelong chronic pain as well. And again, the shot of her crying out in real pain is in the movie. Yeah,
it's tough. It's tough because this movie is so phenomenal, but that will never excuse that kind of choice being made on someone else's behalf. You just don't need to hurt people.
No.
And especially not children.
No. And I mean, we don't know what it would have looked like without those shots. It probably would have been just fine to not have. Yeah. So continuing on, a carpenter cut his thumb off at one point. That's not funny. Sorry. But a carpenter cut his thumb off.
As carpenters are wont to do. Yes.
Yes. And one of the lighting technicians somehow lost a toe. I did not learn why.
In Fitzcarraldo, one of the crew members lost a toe because a piranha bit it off.
In what movie?
Fitzcarraldo, the Werner Herzog film, which was shooting in the Amazon, so slightly different. But that is we have had on our podcast, we discuss innumerable electricians, grips, carpenters. It again, risky environment, being pressed to work very, very quickly.
Yes.
Superman electrician was electrocuted. A stunt performer / metal worker was crushed by the Air Force One set. I mean, again, and we didn't get exact reasoning there, but the common thread is not enough money, not enough time, producers breathing down your neck, and safety is all of a sudden not your first priority, and things go wrong.
Right. So in addition to these injuries, there were a lot of deaths surrounding this movie. I'm going to run through them in a list, and then we can talk about some of them at the end. So Max von Sydow, who's the actor playing Father Merrin, he had a brother who died on the day that shooting began. The woman who played Father Karras's dying mother, who we're going to have Chris pronounce her name.
Well, I will sacrifice myself. I'll jump on the grenade here.
On the altar.
I think Vasiliki Maliados is how I would read it.
Beautiful. It would be horrifying if I tried, so thank you. This was her only role that she ever had. It was in The Exorcist, and she died during post-production. But she was 89 years old, and the reason was natural causes, according to doctors. So actor Jason Miller, who played Father Karras, he had a toddler son who was almost killed during filming when a motorcycle hit or came close to hitting them. It's very vague, and I could not really find a lot of confirmation about. Some sources say the child died. He did not. So there's a lot even around this story that's unknown.
I wonder if that was Jason Patric.
I think that it is. I think that they were able to determine that based on his other son not being born.
Right. Yeah, because Jason Patric is his older son, more famous son, the actor, Jason Patric. Yeah. Yeah,
and they don't really talk about it ever. I mean, not that they should or anything, but we just don't really know exactly what happened with that. The actor Jack McGowan, who played director Bruce Dennings, died from a heart attack related to a cause of the flu, and that was shortly after he finished his work on set. The person responsible for, as we have mentioned, refrigerating the set of Reagan's room so that the breath of the actors would be seen during filming, which also famously meant that Linda Blair was kind of freezing to death for much of the production, wearing only a nightgown in an extremely cold room. The technician who, was able to create that atmosphere also died during production. Other deaths included Linda Blair's grandfather, a night watchman, a special effects expert, and a cameraman's newborn baby, very tragically.
Rudy.
So those are the deaths associated with the film. But the curse did continue, allegedly, decades after the film was finished. Do you know the story about Paul Bateson, who was an extra in the film, and what would happen in 1979?
Oh, yes, I do.
Yeah.
I'll let you tell it.
So in 1979, he was found guilty of the murder of a film critic. Her name was Addison Verrill. And he was also suspected of killing at least 6 other men. And I won't I don't really like to describe the ways that people are murdered, so we'll leave that out. But it was pretty gruesome and very gruesome, I'll say. And he admitted to it, was arrested. So that was, about 6 years after filming ended.
Am I right that he's one of the medical technicians in the sequence in the hospital where she's receiving when she's in the MRI?
Right.
Yeah.
He was, I don't quite remember how they came into contact with him. They might have gone to kind of learn about how to shoot the scene from the NYU Medical Center. And then they just asked him, hey, do you want to basically play yourself in this movie as a technician? And he said yes.
And he's like, as a serial killer? Oh, no, technician. Yes.
Oh, yeah,
certainly.
yes. So then in 1987, the voice actor who played the demon that spoke through Reagan, Mercedes McCambridge, she experienced this absolutely insane tragedy when her son killed his wife and children and then himself.
Oh,
that came,
no.
I know, about 14 years later. So people do say this curse continues on. Yeah, there is a lot around this movie that is very tragic and kind of and extreme in a lot of ways too, versus, Linda Blair's grandfather died. Sure. But then there are also some very, just more dramatic things that happened around this movie. So that's the curse, right? That's the part of the curse that permeated around the cast and crew. But the idea was that the curse sort of extended out to the audience that watched it. What do you guys know about the way that the audience received The Exorcist in 1973 and 74?
I think people were horrified, barfing, leaving the theater.
And yet it was the most successful R-rated film of all time until, I believe, Seth MacFarlane's Ted. So...
Wow, that is so weird.
Dethroned by an even more offensive film.
So bizarre, yeah.
But yeah, so it was the car crash that everybody had to see, in a sense.
Right. That's a good way to put it. So these on-set tragedies and strange occurrences had been leaked to the press slowly as it was building tension, as the movie was coming out. And so audiences were going in with this idea that there was a certain danger to seeing this movie, that there might be a curse, and of course that it might be blasphemous in a way that, if you're even slightly religious, could be pretty psychologically frightening. So a lot of Catholic authorities out there were really happy that the film was being made, surprisingly, because we only really hear about how the Catholic Church was angry or wanted to stop the film from being made. But really, if you watch the movie, the heroes are the priests, right? And it affirms this idea that that evil is real and that we are always in danger of tripping into the occult, by something as simple as playing with a Ouija board. But there was a couple really important figures that kind of broke from that. So Billy Graham told of all magazines, the National Enquirer, because Billy Graham apparently liked to be interviewed there. He said, quote, "The devil is in every frame of that film."
That's the idea, Bill.
Yeah, duh. So it's people interpreted it to mean that not just that the devil was in the movie, but that it was in like the cells of the film itself, which I think is pretty badass, and also reminds me of the Zoolander quote where they're like, they're in the computer.
Yes.
I feel like I've heard you be a Zoolander fan.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Zoolander's great. It's also one of Terrence Malick's favorite films. And that is a true fact. I think one thing that's interesting, because I was raised Catholic and I was confirmed, and everything. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't really for me, nothing against it. But Catholicism, my recollection in the church I went to, the devil is not a big focus at all. The devil is not something that's active in our daily lives. Temptation is, straying from your faith, but the church, it's more about the church as an institution and priests as funnels, to access God and Jesus through. And a different film we'll talk about, there's very much this birth of evangelicalism in the United States in the 70s, in the 60s and 70s.
Absolutely. Oh, so true.
And this idea that the devil is a very active presence, not maybe equal, but an oppositional force to God who is wrestling for your soul. That is very much in the Billy Graham world, an active thought. And I do think it's interesting that it's the Catholic Church that dispels, you know what I'm saying?
It is really interesting.
The demons in this movie, when that's not a really active part of, which is, I'm guessing, why the Catholic Church was okay with it, because it's not like this is a huge thing that we're talking about anyway, and we still are the good guys at the end of the day. And it's not even Satan in the movie. I mean, Pazuzu is famously...
It's Pazuzu.
It's a Mesopotamian demon. It could have been Lamashtu or Lilith or, whoever it is. And so I think that, again, there's and the transition that will happen over the next 10 years is evangelicalism really takes root in the United States. And obviously today it's the biggest Christian religion in the United States and growing rapidly. I just think it's so interesting that the Catholic Church, which was famously like this most censorious force, right? The American League of Decency was a Catholic institution that like is responsible for the Hays Code at the end of the day. Sure. And they're saying, no, this is fine. And then in comes Billy Graham, and now we'll have the rise of Left Behind and all of these other things that are coming.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, it is credited by many sociologists as being the film or the biggest piece of pop culture to kick off the Satanic Panic.
Right.
Followed by Rosemary's Baby a few years before.
Right, which Rosemary's Baby does more directly deal with the devil, and there's like an explicit Faustian bargain and all of these things that are, I think, a little closer to the more traditional Satanic Panic tropes.
Right. Yes. I think they kind of married together, and and we were off to the fucking races with the Satanic Panic. Ouija board specifically, I'd say, was a big part of that. So you were right. There were lots of stories of people vomiting. That was a big thing. The newspapers loved to talk about how multiple people were puking every night, that theaters were providing barf bags.
It's just the popcorn bags. I don't buy it.
I don't buy it.
It's great marketing.
It's good.
Like, that's
of course
what this is at the end of the day.
Yes.
This is a fantastic marketing technique to lean into, right?
Yes.
So good.
And it's like that you're trying to sell the idea that a movie is real, to suspend people's disbelief. And here comes this idea that it's so real that it haunted the people on set, and you could actually, it's risky for you to watch this.
Yeah.
It's a great sales pitch.
Yeah, you could be the one puking after seeing puking, which is also pretty common. So yes, stories of barf bags provided. Stories I love, like that people weren't able to reach the sinks and toilets because there was too much puke everywhere. It was just blocking somehow.
It's just the elevator shot in The Shining of just puke coming everywhere.
Exactly, just green pea soup coming out of the elevator. One quote I found in the papers came from a theater manager, and it said, quote, "My janitors are going bananas wiping up the vomit."
Sure.
Yes, of course. They probably were. But I don't know how much vomit there really could be. I didn't find it particularly vomit-inducing myself. It didn't make me feel sick or anything, but maybe I'm just jaded in a vomit way. So... There were lots of reports in the papers about how ambulances were standing by outside the theater and that people were being taken to the hospital for a variety of ailments caused by the film. A woman in New York was said to have miscarried during a showing, and that was like very widely publicized, which I think is particularly like relevant to this moment and this like evangelical rise. You know, I mean, this is the year, I can't remember if it's 72, 73, but it is when, you know, Roe v. Wade was established. So we have this, I just think that was a very potent story, and that spread for kind of obvious reasons, I think. And then there were reports of heart attacks in the theater. In 1975, the Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease published a paper that documented 4 cases of cinematic neuroses triggered by the film. I think that this is the most possible of the stories that we're hearing right now because, I mean, not only because it was a legitimate paper, but because we have people coming into this movie with all of this repressed Catholic Christian fear. And when they're seeing this movie, it makes sense, especially if someone has some kind of like underlying, we'll use their language, nervous disorder, that it would make sense that it might trigger some sort of psychological episode to me. Does that seem reasonable to you guys? Since I'm not religious, so I have nowhere, you know, I don't really have a right to speak, but
I have no idea. I
don't know.
Yeah.
A movie has never... movies have elicited many emotions for me. Psychosis is not one of them, but
okay,
sure. I mean, I think one of the things you're seeing is more people saw this movie than saw almost any other movie that year or in the year prior or in the year after. And so as a result, you're going to have more outliers than you would have with another film necessarily. And again, once you've been primed, I do believe there's a lot of confirmation bias, right? So
yeah, definitely.
Is it possible that somebody miscarried during other films the year prior or this year and didn't report it because it's a deeply personal thing that they were going through? And also, like, what reporter is going to want to publish your story about your miscarriage? But now all of a sudden it's The Exorcist, and so they say yes. Did a couple people throw up? Sure, I'm sure they did. Was there so much vomit that you couldn't get into the bathroom? That seems unlikely.
Probably not.
You know, but who knows? Maybe there was one theater where they had a chain reaction, like you said, and you know, one person vomited and 9 people followed, and it was slipping down the aisles.
Who's to say?
So exactly.
Well, and we don't even know if that was true, right? Because I think it's pretty clear that some of these stories were being fed, perhaps, to the press.
It's a cultural moment. Everyone wants to be a part of it.
Yes, absolutely. My favorite part of the curse, my absolute favorite, was that allegedly, and I found this on newspapers.com. I found like a couple mentions of this from the actual time that it happened, but very, very few. So I don't really know if this is true. Unconfirmed, but during a screening of the film in Rome, a storm surged around the theater as the audience filed inside, and shortly after, a giant 400-year-old cross on top of a nearby church was struck by lightning, causing it to fall into the crowd in the plaza below.
Cool.
I mean,
except not if it hurt people. That's not cool.
I kind of don't think it happened, but I couldn't find anything. I looked pretty hard. I thought, like, even if it didn't mention The Exorcist, I could find this story of this church being struck by lightning. If you can't
find it, then probably not.
Probably not. But it is a fantastic piece of marketing. So the film premiered, if we rewind a bit, on December 26th, 1973. It was supposed to premiere earlier, but there were so many delays, you know, based on maybe this curse, quote unquote. And the decision maybe came from the studio, who wanted to avoid controversy because releasing an occult-based movie right before Christmas could be seen as pretty offensive. But other sources say that the studio knew that a release date the day after Christmas would still cause controversy, so they were aiming for that day. But Chris and Lizzie, why would Warner Brothers want to cause controversy?
Marketing.
Money.
Thank you. Yes. Ding, ding, ding. So, as you both like to say, the studio was concerned that they might have a big-time flopper on their hands. And a little controversy, a little paranormal flair, a little exaggeration was a good way to get audiences in seats. And obviously, it worked. Later, Linda Blair would say in Shudder's Cursed Films, which is a fun show.
Very fun.
Very fun. quote, Warner Brothers did not believe this movie was going to do anything, and there's a certain PR person, she divulged to me years later when we became friends as adults. She said that she was told to create this whole fear around the movie to try to bring in an audience. Pregnant women shouldn't go, people are throwing up, they parked the ambulance outside the theaters. A lot of this was PR.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So we don't really know what is real, and I don't know if we ever will know, if we'll ever be able to separate fact from marketing. But what we do know is that this has a history. If we look at William Castle in the 50s and 60s, his gimmicks, I think, were a lot more overt, where maybe these gimmicks we're talking about were more covert. But, you know, they had fake nurses attending screenings. They provided sick bags. They gave out fake life insurance with the tickets. So this isn't a new way of getting people into the theater. I just think it's kind of part of the horror experience. And I happen to love a gimmick. I think it's one of the best parts of horror is this lineage of the gimmick.
Well, and I think it also, it plays on the ignorance of the audience, and I include myself in that. But, you know, I remember when the Ultimate Fighting Championship was first introduced, like if you go back to the very, very first one, the gentleman who created it, Art Davie, specifically marketed it as, this is the violence you cannot see anywhere else. Yeah. And somebody could die in the octagon. He knew that wasn't true. And he was lambasted for not giving the fighters gloves. And it was this barbaric thing. But what he knew, and everybody else didn't, is that boxing gloves were introduced not to make fighters safer, but to protect fighters' hands so that you would get more knockouts.
Wow.
So in the late 19th century, bare knuckle boxing was the subject of sports betting, but it didn't result in a lot of quick knockouts. And so you didn't get as many bets in, and it was harder to determine a winner. And so if you gave them gloves and the gloves get wet, the gloves basically turn into sledgehammers. Dang. And you can knock people out much more easily. And so boxing gloves are far more dangerous than bare knuckle. And
wow,
over 1,000 people have died documented in professional boxing bouts. I believe maybe one person has died in any form of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, even though that's presented as barbarism.
Sure,
right? And boxing is
right.
presented as the sweet science, and it's the prestige fighting format. And so again, that was just a marketing technique that he was using in that instance, right? To try to sell this process. But it was actually a safer form of fighting, because if you do grappling and somebody taps out, they're going to tap out before they get knocked out, right?
Wow,
and so it's actually safer at the end of the day. And again, when you were saying, you know, you have all of these people on set and there's a lot of illness and death, and look, movies are so hard to make. I've done it twice, you know, as a director, and the films I directed weren't even hard compared to so many of the movies that we talk about, and they are brutal. Like, you are working 16, 18-hour days with tight turnarounds. You're driving home at night. It's not safe. If you're older, I could imagine, you know, they've shown these things about your body has enough adrenaline to get you through an experience, then it kind of shuts down on you at the end. Everyone notices this when they get sick right after a paper that's been due, you know what I mean, gets turned in or something like that. So, you know, I'm an older woman. It's my one acting job. I make it through this. And then the old ticker goes. I'm a technician who's been working around refrigerant and xenon gas, you know, for example, or whatever, all day on this set. And all of a sudden, you know, my body can't handle it anymore. I'm a director who's been pushing people to the limit and employing unsafe working conditions. And so accidents start to happen and pile up. You know, I think one of my frustrations when we talk about curses, and Lizzie's going to dive into another film, so I'll shut up in 1 second, but is that we ignore the preventable things that we can do to help ensure that things like this don't happen to people in the future, like improving our medical system or improving our police system and protection for people who might be dealing with an abusive partner, or stricter workplace safety regulations via OSHA or the guilds, so that people are not dealing with unsafe electrical equipment and whatnot. So I think, again, it's like, it is really important to hunt down the individual causes, as tempting as it might be to say that there is a catch-all, because those are the failures that people are responsible for, and we can change those things.
Absolutely. Well said, Chris. More after this. And now, back to the show. Lizzie, would you like to take it away for your movie?
I would. And
okay.
I think both of the movies that we are bringing to the table today, I like the curses involved in these. I don't like what the curses did, but the sort of the fun thing about these curses is that there is, there's potentially a reason for both of them, like a tangible reason. So let's find out more. So we're going to start with Poltergeist, which was released in 1982. Fun fact, about a week before E.T. came out.
Wow.
And those two movies are very entwined because Poltergeist is, of course, co-written with a story by Steven Spielberg. And he wrote that alongside Michael Grace, Mark Victor. Directed by Tobe Hooper, it stars Craig T. Nelson, JoBeth Williams, Dominique Dunn, Heather O'Rourke, Zelda Rubinstein, who's so wonderful in this movie, and many, many more. So, little fun fact is that Poltergeist translates to, Chris?
Noisy ghost.
There we go. Noisy ghost. And they're typically responsible for throwing things, causing disturbances, being generally loud and annoying. And I could be wrong about this, but I believe they are more known to haunt people than they are haunt places. So we're not going to get into this too much here. There's a lot of controversy around Poltergeist in terms of who actually directed it. Do you know any of this?
I do because I listened to your episode.
Okay.
about this. Yeah. But I know that we had a little bit of a shadow director, potentially.
Potentially, yeah. We can keep this short, but just a little bit of an interesting tidbit about Poltergeist is that, the genesis for the idea did kind of come from Steven Spielberg working with Tobe Hooper. Tobe Hooper, of course, was known for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And the rumor that began circulating during the production of this that has extended beyond is that Tobe Hooper didn't really direct Poltergeist and that Steven Spielberg did. Now, I think where we landed on that, I don't know that that's totally fair. It kind of seems like Hooper may have handled a lot of the horror. Spielberg may have handled more of the family dynamic type stuff.
But that's ultimately conjecture because we don't
know.
Nobody knows.
No, some people did come out and say Spielberg directed this movie, some of the crew on the set, but, again, we don't know exactly what happened there, but we do know that there was a curse, Chelsey. So let's get into it.
All right, I'm ready.
All right. So the first thing, what's one of the scariest moments in this movie to you?
Okay. I mean, it's I do want to just jump to the skeleton scene, right? I want to go to the pool scene.
Okay.
Well, what is the right answer?
The right answer is the clown.
Of course. But I love the clown too. I have a fondness.
Oh,
we do a lot of haunted clown, paranormal clown content. So I've grown to really
do Hell House LLC. You should watch that movie.
Yeah, well, and Hell House is fun. But I am a true blue Tim Curry as Pennywise. That is a top three for me horror movie. So I've just always, even as a kid, I liked the scary clown trope. So I have a fondness perhaps for the clown. But yes, of course, the clown is quite scary.
Fun fact about my mother-in-law, she, I think, does not understand why clowns and or very haunted looking dolls are terrifying. And she famously decorated a room in their house entirely covered in clowns. It was a clown themed room.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until multiple people were like, this is terrifying, that she was like, oh, I should redecorate. But she had no idea.
What's so interesting about the clown thing is that before, a certain point, before the 1970s, 80s, people weren't scared of clowns. I mean, if you look at Bozo, that is a scary ass clown. But everybody loved Bozo.
Yes.
There were wait times for months and years to get into one of the shows. And then suddenly, there were some, we won't get into that, but there were these cultural forces, including It, but it started before It. But, there were these different things that happened that changed the clown as we know it. So it makes sense that older people just don't get what's so freaky.
That's true. That's fair.
All right. Tell me about the clown, too.
Well, so obviously the clown in the film, it wraps its arms around the child, the brother. And it turns out that the doll that they built to do this was a mechanical doll, and it was a little too good at its job. It actually began to legitimately strangle the child who was playing the part. And apparently Spielberg and Hooper were like, wow, this kid, A+ acting. He's really doing a lot of improvising here. And he was not. He was choking. It was tightening too much around his neck. And apparently Spielberg jumped in and removed the clown when he saw that the child's lips were turning blue.
Jeez,
so
yeah.
I'm going to go with, if we're going with curse or not curse across the course of these 2 episodes, I'm going to say not curse. And maybe you should assume that your small child actor is not improvising as they're gasping for air. But that's affiliated. Now we're going to get into some of the spookier, sadder, scarier things.
Okay.
Jo Beth Williams, who plays the mom, she said that there were some unusual happenings in the apartment that she rented during filming. Every time she would leave the house, she would straighten all the pictures. And when she'd come home, they would all be askance. But Chris, any ideas as to why perhaps that was happening?
A big truck drives by outside. Humidity changes. She forgets that she didn't do a very good job straightening them.
She thinks she was slamming the door and that's what was causing them all to shift. Or it was a geist.
It's perfect. It's perfect. Let me just slam.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Now getting into some of the more upsetting ones and the deaths that are affiliated with poltergeist. So the first... Dominique Dunn, who plays the older sister in the film. Side note, she was the daughter of Dominic Dunn. And I don't know if you watched the Ryan Murphy Menendez brothers show, but played very brilliantly by Nathan Lane.
Okay, I did not, unfortunately. Yeah.
Oh, it's a thing. It's a thing. Yep. I enjoyed it.
I fell off the Ryan Murphy train, but...
Me too. I was in for Nip Tuck 3 seasons, and then eventually I...
Nobody talks about his masterpiece Popular from the 90s, but that'll always be my favorite.
No.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Revisit.
Keeps pulling me back in for better and probably for worse.
I can't blame you at all. Yeah.
Okay, so anyone who doesn't know, Dominic Dunn would go on to be a very important and successful investigative journalist, particularly covering crime and very sensational murders for outlets like Vanity Fair. And the reason that his career turned to that is what we're about to talk about. So either right before being cast in Poltergeist or immediately after, she began dating a guy named John Sweeney. He was emotionally and physically abusive, and he was particularly jealous of the fame that she acquired from Poltergeist. At one point, he actually attacked a fan who approached her after the film came out in public. Oh. Eventually, after a particularly gruesome episode where he strangled her, by the way, in a house where some of their friends were staying in the house with them and came out when they heard what was happening, she left him. She was like, he's dangerous. I cannot stay with this man. On October 30th, he showed up at her house while she was rehearsing with a friend. And again, they were very much not together, although he tells a different story. She went out on the porch to talk to him alone, and he proceeded to strangle her. She was taken to a hospital where she remained on life support, and she was removed 5 days later on November 4th, 1982. She was 22 years old.
Oh, my God.
This is a really crazy case. We don't have time to get into a lot, but this guy... Man, fuck this guy. He made it into a situation where he claimed that, it was a lover's quarrel and she had reconciled with him days earlier. And then when he got there, she's telling a different story and he was just so angry and, he didn't know what was happening and it wasn't premeditated at all. And it's like he did a very minimal amount of prison time for this.
Really?
Yes. Wow. And it did. This is really what sort of tripped Dominic Dunn into investigating crime, particularly in wealthy families and in sort of higher echelons of society, which is what he became very famous for doing. So that's very sad.
Yeah.
In 1987, Heather O'Rourke, who plays the little girl, the blonde girl, she was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, but it turns out that was a misdiagnosis. 1 year later, she collapsed in her home, went into cardiac arrest on the way to the hospital. She was rushed into surgery where it was discovered that she had a bowel obstruction, which is likely what she'd had all along, something she may have been born with. She survived the surgery, but died shortly after of cardiac arrest in the recovery room. She was 12 years old.
And how old was she in the movie? Do we know?
She's very little. So she was 12 in 1987. So I believe she would have been
8. Seven.
I think 8 is right. Yeah, 7.
Yeah.
Really little.
That is incredibly
That's very sad.
Yeah, these are I don't know. It is like, Chris, when we're talking about the violence is it a curse or is it domestic violence that we do not address properly in our culture?
100% it's domestic violence.
Right.
Yes. And of course, statistically, the most dangerous time for a woman or any partner in a domestically violent relationship is when they are trying to leave, which is exactly what that was.
Right. Yep. And then, Heather O'Rourke having a medical episode that was misdiagnosed.
Yeah.
I don't lay blame necessarily on doctors, but again, it's not curse-like to me. It's just extremely sad, but also something that happens to people. And it just happened to happen to a famous little girl. So
true.
Yeah, incredibly sad. Incredibly sad. Okay.
Well, in Poltergeist 2, the man who played Reverend Kane, Julian Beck, was ill with stomach cancer throughout the filming, I believe, and passed away shortly after filming before the movie came out. But again, he had, I think, been battling it for quite a long time. Now, this one's pretty weird. In 1992, actor Richard Lawson, who played Ryan, he's one of the paranormal investigators, got on U.S. Air Flight 405 from LaGuardia to Cleveland, Ohio. According to him, a stewardess allegedly recognized him from Poltergeist and moved him up to first class.
Mm-hmm.
At least one person seated in his original row died when the plane botched its takeoff and flew off the runway into Flushing Bay, and 27 people on board the plane died.
But he did not.
He did not.
That seems like the opposite of a curse.
Well, I guess that's true. The poltergeist moved him up to first class.
God, that is so scary. Plane crashes are like just one of the most frightening things I can ever imagine in my head. Okay. Oof.
I know. All right.
Okay.
We're almost done with Poltergeist. So other deaths associated with the curse include Will Sampson, who played the shaman in Poltergeist 2. He died during surgery many years later. But again, this was a medical thing. A crew member several years later was murdered during a home invasion. And even the Poltergeist reboot with Rosemary DeWitt and Sam Rockwell saw some strange hauntings on set. But I think this is kind of a constellation of terrible things that has happened to people affiliated with this film. It doesn't give me strong curse vibes until you get this one piece of information. So, Chris, what's the most famous line in Poltergeist?
You moved the headstones! You left the bodies, but you moved the headstones!
Yes, it's Craig T. Nelson having an absolute aneurysm screaming, "You son of a bitch! You left the bodies!" Yes. So you might think that a whole movie revolving around the idea that you should really leave human remains alone and in their graves would understand that that's something you should also do on your film set. And yet the filmmakers did not abide by this rule. So here is the popular and possible explanation for the poltergeist curse. While production spared no expense on a lot of the effects, they did cut corners in some very spooky areas. Now, you mentioned the scene, Chelsey. For the scene where JoBeth Williams is swimming in the pool with skeletons, they used real skeletons. Real human boneses.
Which is funny because when I first saw it, I thought they look kind of fake. They were totally real.
They're completely real.
And maybe that's why they look fake.
They're completely real. I know.
Yeah.
Were you seeing the fake ones? I agree.
Well, apparently just getting actual bodies was way cheaper than getting the replicas, because at the time replicas were very, very expensive. They got them from a medical supply company. So I just love the idea that like these bodies were donated to science or something. Instead they're in the pool in Poltergeist.
I guess. So, if it were me, I would be stoked to be a skeleton in Poltergeist, but maybe not everyone would. But,
That's true.
Yeah, I'd be fine.
That's true.
We actually cover, for anyone listening who hasn't heard it or might want to revisit it, we have an episode called 12-Foot Skeleton. We talk about that phenomenon, but then we go through the history of skeletons as decoration, like how we've used skeletons in all of these strange ways. And so this was actually so common. It was very common to use real skeletons in classrooms, in, medical situations, and also in movies because, it was very cheap. There was a whole Indian market for it, which I won't get into. But when I learned that, I was quite shocked. So I did know this one about the skeletons, and that does lend itself to a certain kind of story.
To this day, there are people in China who believe that they have seen their loved ones who have disappeared on display in those bodies exhibits.
That's So freaky.
No.
And who, you guys can look up the stories. It's not verified, but they think this person disappeared from this province and they were 8 months pregnant and they wanted them their lover wanted them gone, and all of a sudden there is an 8-month pregnant body on display in the bodies exhibit. That last story may just have been hearsay, but I've heard of these repeatedly and again, people are asserting this. Right. It's not confirmed in any way, but yeah.
Well, there's also instances, I could be wrong, I think it was maybe Dawn of the Dead, where people did not realize the skeleton they were purchasing for the movie was real. And I think that one is one where like later on it wound up in a thrift shop and some police officer was like, that looks real. They tested it. It was, and it was like a missing person. So be careful where you buy your skeletons. I think that's really the moral of this story.
Don't go the cheap route.
That's right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, so that's Poltergeist. I'm kind of zipping through it because I think the more interesting and shocking of the two of these really is The Omen.
All right.
Now, The Omen, it's really teasing Satan. Everything that they're doing here, they're leaning into the devil big time. It was released June 6th, 1976. 666, the number of the beast, of course.
Did it really come out on 666?
Yes.
They did it. That's so cool.
They did it.
It's incredible.
Directed by Richard Donner, written by David Seltzer, starring, of course, Gregory Peck, Lee Remick, David Warner, and many, many other people, including Harry Stevens as Satan's spawn himself, Damien. So a little bit of background, and this relates to The Exorcist. The Exorcist was, of course, an enormous financial success, as was Rosemary's Baby. So really, the idea for The Omen came about because a marketing and PR exec named Robert Munger, who was a born-again Christian, was like,
Satan sells.
Satan's hot right now. And Satan sells, and I think we can do this one better. So he pulls the idea for The Omen basically out of the book of Revelations. What if the devil were walking among us, and what if he were a little boy? He takes this idea to his producer friend, who's 100% on board. They get a screenwriter on board. The screenwriter is like, I don't want to treat this so literally. And Robert Munger is like, no. He was known to tell people that this was going to be a dangerous mission, and the devil wouldn't like it.
The devil made me do it.
We're about to expose the devil. Yeah. God, that movie. Yes. The whole Conjuring universe is an entirely different conversation.
That's another episode. Maybe we need to do that one day.
The Omen walked so the Conjuring could run. Let's be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. So for more detail on this, obviously listen to our episode. But the curse perhaps began just before filming. On June 28th, 1975, this is a few months, I think, before they were supposed to roll camera, Gregory Peck's 31-year-old son committed suicide. But the craziest part about this is that Gregory Peck moves forward with the movie.
Yeah. Oof. I don't know. Yeah.
It's a movie where he's trying to murder his son for the last 30 minutes of it.
Yeah. That's complicated. Yeah.
He's amazing in this movie.
Yes, he is. He's very good. Wow.
He goes right ahead. So in this movie, everyone's struck by lightning. Just before filming, Gregory Peck's plane to London, which was direct from LA, was hit by lightning. 3 days later, the screenwriter took the same flight from LAX to Heathrow, and it too was hit by lightning.
Jesus. Okay.
And then executive producer Mace Neufeld's plane was also hit by lightning. Later, while filming in Rome, producer Harvey Bernard was also almost struck by lightning. It's too much lightning.
Oh my God.
Especially since lightning does feature prominently in one of my favorite deaths in The Omen. So it's a lot of lightning.
Lizzie, do we know if these things are confirmed?
Some of them are.
Okay.
The planes being hit, these people did say that happened.
Okay.
So I will say this one freaks me out a little bit because a lot of this stuff is coming direct from the cast and crew.
Sure. Okay.
Chris?
So one of the things that we talked about when we were doing this episode is this cursed or is it the 70s? And so I can't speak to the prevalence of lightning during air travel or how often are we aware of it when it does happen when we're in a plane now. I'll let aviation experts speak to that. There were a number of car accidents, and there is one Magnolia-esque, to reference the Paul Thomas Anderson film, incident that is tangentially involved with this movie. That is very unusual. I don't think it's curse related, but it is just, it would work in that opening montage of Magnolia where he's describing the improbable unlikelihood of certain things happening. So there was a head-on car crash day one of the shoot. Nobody was hurt. The car accidents to me make a lot of sense. Again, you're moving quickly. People are very tired. By the way, day one of shooting is 8, 12, 16 weeks into prep on this movie.
Also, they're shooting in Italy and London. The drivers, these are probably Americans driving there. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. Like, yeah.
That's a good point.
They take it with a grain of salt. It wasn't verified. Gregory Peck, though I don't know why this would not be true, slammed the car door on the hand of the actor that played his taxi driver in Italy, who does seem very angry at Gregory Peck in this scene.
Yes,
and you can see a splint on his finger in some of these shots. And the accidents like these happen, obviously not just in film. People slam their fingers in car doors, devil or not, all the time. Although,
which is so horrible. Slamming your...
it is.
So
I lost a nail that way once, and I was...
You did? Ugh.
Yeah, but then, they grow back.
Sure. Yeah. I guess it's good deal. That's all that happened. Yeah.
Yeah. And then while in London, Richard Donner, he's getting out of Harvey's car. It gets hit by another speeding car, slamming him between the car and the car door. But again, he was fine. Okay. And now... the 70s aspect is we're in the Troubles now. And so the IRA is very active and not dissimilar from the number of bomb threats in the United States, although they're actually going through with them across the pond. So Donner's hotel was bombed during production, and a subway the crew was walking toward at one point was blown up as they approached it. And one of the producers had his lunch reservation canceled when he learned that the restaurant had been blown up an hour before he was supposed to sit down there.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
This definitely qualifies as it was the 70s, though, I would say.
Yes, I'll say.
Yes. And so let me, before I'll let Lizzie get to our fun dogs and a couple of other things, some animal fun, as we'll call it.
Yeah.
But this is the one, this is a tragedy, and we mentioned birds before, and birds continue to dog airplanes, to mix animal metaphors, all over the world. We had that horrible plane crash recently in South Korea. I don't know if that was ultimately determined to be bird-related on one of the engines, but...
I had a bird-related horrifying experience on an airplane. Not a fan.
Yeah. So when birds hit the turbine,
that's what happened.
Not a lot to do. So they had chartered an airplane. The plane company comes back and they say, look, we booked a full charter today, but if you let us take that charter out and push your shoot, we'll give you a big discount. And as Lizzie, I don't know if you mentioned it here, but we mentioned in our episode, this movie was being made at a price, I believe $2 million.
They kept cutting it because they also had The Exorcist 2, I think.
Right.
And so what they were doing is they were like, this one's kind of on the back burner. Let's cut it. It's like a backup devil movie.
Yeah, and Donner was a journeyman director. He was a very accomplished television director. His forays into film had not been particularly successful, and he was a little old. I mean, he was in his 40s by this point. And so this movie, this is not, an up-and-coming hot director, who's done horror before. This is his first foray into the genre, and he is not a, big name, even like maybe Tobe Hooper and Poltergeist, who had the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So Donner says yes, because they can use the money on the budget. As the plane is taking off, hits a flock of birds, engines fail. It crashes back into the runway, and it basically crashes off of the runway onto a street just beyond the airport, hits a car on the street, kills everybody in the car, and in the car were the wife and 2 children of the pilot of the plane.
That is so crazy.
Who had presumably just dropped him off,
it's crazy.
Whenever before. So again, curse, no, but freak, weird coincidence.
Yeah.
Very weird.
Absolutely very unusual. So let's, again, a tragedy. Again, though, if anything, what this would suggest is the devil wants this movie to get made because Donner wasn't on that flight, right? So it kind of goes against the curse logic.
Or the devil's bad at changing plans at the last minute.
He kind of sucks. He's not the best. There's a reason he's number 2 behind the big guy. But all right. We'll kick it over to Lizzie for...
nice. But yeah, this movie, this does freak me out because the number of crazy things that happened, like that plane crash is just, it's horrifying.
Yeah.
This is less horrifying, maybe a bit funnier. The hellhounds were not very well behaved. So they were supposed to be highly trained German shepherds that they'd been planning on bringing to England from the US for the shoot. But they find out at the last minute, you cannot just bring dogs to a foreign country. They have to serve, I believe it was like a 6-month quarantine, which of course that's not going to work.
Yeah. I think that happened to Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, right? When they were trying to go to Australia with their dogs.
They smuggled their dogs in. Yeah.
I think it happened with Justin Bieber and a monkey as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right.
He abandoned a monkey.
Oh, no.
Never forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the only dogs available to them, last minute were the really terrifying, who knows how trained they were, Rottweilers that you see in this movie.
They are scary.
They're so scary.
I said that to my partner, Miranda, when we were watching. I was just like, Rottweilers are scary. They're just a scary dog.
They're big. They're big. Yeah.
Muscly.
So during the scene in the graveyard, David Warner's stuntman was attacked by one of the Rottweilers, which is planned. He's wearing padding and everything. But what was not planned is that it bit through both the metal and leather armor that he had on, resulting in 14 stitches.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Oof. I got bit by a small dog during lockdown when I was on one of my, little walks, and it was a small dog, and I had to go to the doctor, and it was very upsetting. And I can't imagine what it would be like to really have a huge dog coming at you and ripping your flesh open.
It's like one of my biggest fears is to be attacked by a dog, or to have my child be attacked by a dog, just because
fair.
I don't know how when it's a dog that big, I don't know how you get them off.
No, you kind of don't.
You kind of don't. Yeah.
Okay. Oof.
All right. So more animals.
Mm-hmm.
They filmed that sequence with the baboons, which is terrifying.
Terrifying.
At the Windsor Wild Safari Park. And when they get there, they're like, okay, so you want the baboons to attack the car? No problem. We're just going to not feed them for a couple hours, and then we'll cover the top of the car with bananas. As one does, because again, it's the 70s.
Okay. Yeah, the 70s.
So they try that. All the baboons come running out, and then they just sit on top of the car and eat the bananas because they don't care,
Yeah.
So Richard Donner's like, God damn it, cut the cameras. This is not working. The animal wrangler says, okay, look, I have an idea. The biggest baboon king of Safari Park, has a big cut that I need to stitch up. So I need to knock him out anyway and remove him from the enclosure to treat it. And I think if you put him in the back seat of the car while he's unconscious and let the other baboons see him being driven away, they'll probably go a little nuts.
Wow.
So they do it.
Wow.
They do it with Lee Remick and Harvey Stevens in the car. And I believe Richard Donner may have been in the car as well. They roll cameras. Suddenly, Lee Remick, who plays the mother, starts screaming. Richard Donner's like, Lee, it's too early. Chill out. And she's like, no, I'm screaming because the baboon is awake and it has its hands in my hair.
No.
Yes. It is ripping at her hair. They managed to get it untangled, and they filmed as long as they could before the handler is like, I cannot hold this thing. You need to get out of the enclosure and get him out of the car so we can sedate him. So that's what you're seeing is that shot.
Wow.
There's an actual baboon in the back of the car. They were right. The other baboons go totally nuts. They're following them out of there. That's like my worst nightmare. I do not like baboons.
No, and especially with their hands in your hair.
No.
Ugh.
So again, that was also, I would say, the 70s.
Yes.
Don't do that. And then this one is crazy. They had shot a scene with lions in the park that was not used. And the day they left the lion enclosure to go to the baboons, the guard of that enclosure had left his door open. And I believe this was a little harder to confirm, but 2 lions came in and mauled this guy to death.
Wow. To death?
Yeah.
Whoa. Okay.
So this one is confirmed, and this is probably the most famous element of the curse, and it is very sad. So Friday, August 13th, 1976, just 2 months after The Omen came out, John Richardson, who was a special effects supervisor on the film, and his girlfriend, Liz Moore, and by the way, I've seen her listed as an assistant in some places, but I've heard enough people refer to her as a girlfriend.
Mm-hmm.
They were working on a bridge too far in Belgium when they got into a very bad car accident. Richardson walked away with a few cuts and bruises, However, Liz Moore was decapitated by a flying tire.
Holy shit. Wow. Okay.
And of course, one of the most famous scenes from The Omen is the decapitation of the photographer.
Yeah.
It gets weirder than that.
Okay.
Now, this is rumor, but rumor has it that the accident took place next to a road sign that stated 66.6 kilometers to the town of Omen, O-M-M-E-N. However, I did some sleuthing into this.
All right.
And according to one of the producers, John and his girlfriend were in Belgium. However, Omen is a town in the Netherlands. Belgium does border it, but the closest border point that I could find was over 200 kilometers. So I don't buy that. Okay. But the producer does say that when John came to from the crash, he looked up and saw a sign that said 66.6 kilometers to Liège, Belgium.
Okay. So we think the 666 may be true.
That actually may be true. But the town of Omen, no.
Okay.
Now, if you ask Munger, who developed this idea, and Harvey Bernard, producer, if they think there was a curse, they said absolutely yes. Mm-hmm. But Chris, would you like to share Richard Donner's take?
Far more terrifying. 20th Century Fox, again, looking for that marketing angle. Mm-hmm. And he doesn't believe the film was cursed. He thinks the PR team was too excited to jump on the idea of the film being cursed. I'll just say, Donner, I do think he's a really good director, and I like a lot of his movies. We've covered 2 of them now, and accidents tend to happen on his films. Do they happen more than on other films of similar scope and scale? I couldn't speak to that, but it's clear that things move at a pace and certain decisions are made, like putting a live baboon in an open enclosure with a child and a mother, that could very obviously result in harm to the people involved. And again, notice the curse of Superman is another curse we didn't cover today, that supposed cursed, but is very much perpetuated by some of the things that unfortunately happened on the making of 1978 Superman, which again was a movie that was kind of put together. It had a really high budget, but a little bit with gum and popsicle sticks by the Salkinds, which were 2, I would call them dilettante producers who very much wanted to play Hollywood, but didn't necessarily have the experience to back it up. And so there was a lot of money, Warner Brothers money, and there was maybe 2 producers and a line producer, Pierre Spengler, who didn't have experience necessary for a film of that scale. And then Donner as well, who's a little in over his head. This was a follow-up to The Omen because The Omen was an enormous success, and he got this opportunity because of that reason. And so again, is it a curse, or is it there are not the right guardrails in place here to try to prevent some of these things from happening?
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think I think another thing that just popped into my head as we were doing this that kind of makes horror a little bit unique is that a lot of these things are happening because, or maybe concurrently with the actor being frightened, being upset, being, acting out pain. And so there is this thing that happens where we don't know that the baboon is grabbing the actress's hair. We don't know that Linda Blair is being injured on the bed because the acting asks for the same reaction that she is actually having. And I think that is maybe part of why some of these things are happening, in addition to the conditions of the set and maybe some irresponsible choices made by the director and others.
Yeah. One last interesting thing about The Omen, because you've mentioned that sort of the satanic panic takes off in a big way in the later 70s and, of course, across the 80s and early 90s. Mm-hmm. I didn't know this, but, 666 being the number of the beast, that was not something that was in the sort of pop cultural zeitgeist, I don't think, prior to this movie. And there's a lot in this movie that really popularized this sort of satanic lore in a way that we had not seen before. And now all of a sudden you have all of these symbols that are associated with Satan in the pop culture lexicon and things for people to look for in a way that they didn't have before. I do think that this movie contributed pretty heavily to the sort of, maybe it's not a word, but like the literalization of Satan.
Yeah.
And the idea that he's a person. It can inhabit people. It walks among us. There are physical signs you can find.
Right.
There's all this. This takes it sort of a step further in terms of like, oh, you want to find an actual living, breathing, walking reason for your problems. He's out there.
Yeah. And I mean, if a film can be cursed, maybe a record can be cursed. Maybe toys can be cursed, right? It's not just people that can be possessed. It becomes all of these things we saw in the Satanic Panic. Dungeons and Dragons can be cursed, and interacting with the cursed object in some way will lead to obviously some satanic consequences for the kids especially. And I also think it's interesting that these three movies that are, cursed do involve children, right? Like they are all around some kind of, I guess possession would be the right word in these cases, maybe very different types, but I think that's pretty interesting. And I do think it makes sense in a way, right? That we're most concerned about the children and the influence that, certain cultural forces may have upon their development, which is, an evergreen part of any moral panic.
Yeah, I think calling something a curse, my fear is this is an abdication of our responsibility to one another. And I'm not religious, but I do believe we are all deeply interconnected, if only by the virtue that we inhabit the very narrow band of livable space on a tiny pinprick in an ever-expanding universe. And that is not to say that I think these things are accidents. I don't believe in accidents. There are causes for everything, and we exist within vast interconnected systems, and these systems fail and they let people down. And just because we've been the beneficiaries of them, I myself have been very lucky for the most part, does not mean they cannot be improved, and that we should not be always critical of our systems and institutions, because to love something is to want it to be the best version that it can possibly be. And so again, I would just say we are all connected, but these things are not connected by some evil force. They are connected by, again, failures of our systems.
Yeah, humans.
Of human failures in many instances. And we should always seek to plug those holes, as tragic as it may be with the horse, that's already gotten out of the barn, because there are other horses in the barn, and that, again, from everything to protecting the rights of children, especially children who are working. And that's something that we made drastic progress on through much of the first half of the 20th century. But then in Hollywood, we still kind of exist in a little bit of a, like, let's send Jimmy down to the coal mine. He's 6, he can handle it, sort of attitude. So again, I think Hollywood takes advantage of this idea that it's art, right? It's justified in some way. We can't rest on that, I think.
Very well said. Yeah, very well said, Chris. Lizzie, do you have any final thoughts?
No, I think Chris summed it up better than I could.
He summed it up?
Yeah.
Great.
Lizzie swung back to skeptical for a moment, and then later today, when something moves on its own, she's going to be right back to believer.
That's right.
Hey, have fun with it, Lizzie.
Thank you. I will.
Well, this has been really just such a joy. I love talking to you both. And I just want to say to our audience, please listen to What Went Wrong. It is truly one of my favorite shows. You guys have brought me a lot of comfort. It's a very comforting show to me for whatever reason. You're both very easy to listen to, and I love learning about film. And I don't even watch most of the movies you cover before you cover them, and I still really enjoy listening. So please listen to their show, and we will definitely link that in the show notes. So anyway, really appreciate you both. I hope we can do this again sometime.
Thank you, Chelsey.
Yeah, this was great. Thank you so much.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween. And stay cursed.
I hopefully won't. Thank you.
This was American Hysteria. Make sure you subscribe to What Went Wrong wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to support our show, make sure we can continue making it and get ad-free episodes and bonus content, go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. We're featuring a new ongoing series called Dispatches from the Field, where I will talk at you about whatever I want for however long I want in an unedited, uncensored stream of consciousness. Our first communique came this summer when I was camping by myself in the middle of nowhere and had my first Bigfoot experience. Or did I? The next communique in our series is all about my lifelong history with ghost experiences. Of course, you'll also get access to Hysteria Home Companion, the other podcast that I do with our producer Miranda, where we tell you stories related to the topics that we cover and stories we just know that you'll love. So go to patreon.com/American Hysteria or subscribe on Apple Plus. If you go to AmericanHysteria.com, you can pick up some of our merch, and 100% of the profits go to the Samir Project, a Palestinian-led mutual aid group that are on the ground in Gaza delivering food and supplies to displaced families. That's AmericanHysteria.com. You can also leave us a message on our Urban Legends hotline about a tale that you remember from growing up, or even one you've heard recently, and we may do an entire investigation about it. American Hysteria's producer and editor is Miranda Zickler. Our associate producer is Riley Swedelius Smith, and I'm your host, Chelsey Weber Smith. Thanks, as always, for listening, and I hope you have a great week.